Today's conversation is about something most of us don't realize we're doing while we're doing it, choosing love based on our past. Have you ever asked yourself, what kind of person is right for me? How do you know if this is the one? And the truth is, the better question isn't just who you date, it's why you're drawn to who you've been drawn to. I've watched marriages fall apart. I've seen love start strong and end painfully. So when we talk about choosing a partner, we're not just talking about dating. We're talking about who you might want a life with, who you want to marry, who you'll navigate money, family, conflict, stress, and growth with over decades. That's a very different question than, do we have chemistry? Why do we keep feeling pushed towards certain types of partners? Why does chemistry sometimes feel electric, but also chaotic? And how much of our relationship pattern is actually rooted in our childhood? In today's episode of Her Energy Unlocked, we'll explore how unresolved trauma and old dynamics quietly replay themselves in relationships, and how to recognize when you're choosing habit instead of health. Then we'll shift into what truly predicts long-term love, what actually makes a relationship last. Because choosing a partner isn't just about love, it's about alignment, maturity, and building something that can actually last. Today on Her Energy Unlocked, I am super excited to have Harj here on, who is a registered clinical counselor with over 18 years of experience supporting children, youth, and families throughout the Lower Mainland. Harj is known for creating a deeply accepting, judgment-free space where clients feel safe, seen, and heard. Harj, thank you so much for being on today's episode of Her Energy Unlocked. I am so excited to have you on here.
Thank you very much for having me and that lovely intro.
You're welcome. There's a lot to unpack, and that's why I suggested when we chatted that we do a two-part episode. But the reason I wanted this episode to be two parts, because if we're looking at marriages later on in life, it doesn't fall apart then. What you really have to understand is kind of the basics and the foundation, and where maybe things are underlyingly flawed. And so that's why this is a two-part series. So super excited to have you on here. But the goal of this episode is to really lay down a foundation to understand your habits when it comes to relationships. Now, Harj, I gave you a great intro because you're awesome, professional, and you're very good at your job. But why don't you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself?
For sure. Yeah. So as you mentioned, my name's Harj. Full name's Harjinder, but lots of us have nicknames, so that's one of mine. Background wise, my folks are from India. They moved over to England way back in the late 60s, married, had kids. We lived in a huge joint family. So grew up with lots of cousins, aunts, uncles in the same house until families grew up and grew apart. And then we moved out this way to Canada. So I moved right after university. So I was around 22. I've worked here, kind of started off working with youth and then started working with families, more into mental health and counseling. I'm married myself, been married about 14 years. And yeah, I love what I do. Cliche, I know.
You work with a lot of families and marriages, and I've done a couple of podcasts just talking about relationships and divorce, and especially in like South Asian culture, there's a lot. Either we didn't see our parents in healthy relationships, or there's also a societal pressure for certain people to get married at a certain age. And, fast forward now at my age, I'm seeing those marriages fall apart because these questions were not asked. If you think your relationship is falling apart, this episode's good too, because it'll help you identify things that maybe you and your partner need to work on fundamentally before you get to the next level. So talking about partner selection, we all have watched, well, I grew up watching Indies, and the partner selection was the guy who does the dance for you, and he's forbidden love. You're not allowed to marry him. And both parents are upset because maybe both fathers were friends back in the day. That was kind of what we were taught, or a whole generation of women were taught, as partner selection. As long as you have chemistry and you're willing to compromise, things are good. But nobody got into what compromise actually means and how much compromise really depends on what your foundation is of your own values. What goes into picking a partner?
That's a big question, very big question. I think at the start of it is probably knowing a little bit about yourself. What are you like? What are your habits? Why do you want a partner? Is it because this is what we do in the world and we get married and we're supposed to have kids and then da 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 da? So I would back up there too as to why is it important for me to have a partner? What am I looking for in a partner in terms of values, in terms of what are they going to bring to the table? What am I bringing to the table in that relationship, even? So I think lots of questions about yourself before you kind of start looking for what I'd like to add to my life in a partner.
And that's tough because in South Asian culture, traditionally, women go from their parents' house then to the married house, and they haven't had that gap of understanding themselves, who they are, and what they want. Like I said earlier, there's that pressure that, okay, you're 30 now, you're done school, you have a job, go find somebody. But it's just not that easy because you're trying to figure out who you are, what you want, and dealing with these pressures. How does childhood patterns affect the partner you pick?
Yeah, I think you mentioned the word a few times already. It's pretty foundational, right? So when you think about your childhood, the relationships that you've had, and the relationships that you observed, they're pretty foundational because that's where you kind of make sense of this is how relationships work. This is how a husband and wife work together. This is how they talk to each other. These are the things they do with each other. These are the things they don't do with each other. So I think it plays a pretty big role when you think about even those younger years and then again, think about your early teens with a lot of us, maybe not so much now, but a lot of us in our late teens, definitely late teens, but into our early 20s, we're still at home as well. So as we become an adult and try and figure out how to have relationships outside of the home, again, we've still got kind of that foundation of home coming in. So I think it plays a pretty big part. Even beyond that, I would think how have our parents, how are their attachments growing up? Because that's going to then form how they attach with us and then so on and so on. So while there's change, I think it's important to consider kind of the people that came before us as well, because how they were cared for is going to impact how they care for us, how we care for ourselves, and then how we care for other people as well.
I've talked to friends who've had, unfortunately, alcoholic parents, and that sometimes repeats because that's their level of normalcy. But once again, it hasn't been discussed, so they just think that that's normal.
Yes, and you'd be surprised the amount of, so most of my clientele of Punjabi background, it's probably like over 90%. And, again, they reach out just for this familiar piece. If they want to say something like, refer to an aunt as a masi or a bua, I know what that means. I can place that person. But the amount that says, yeah, normal childhood, dad drank after work, yada, yada. And it just comes out of their mouth like, this is just how life is. And we all know it's this way and it's okay.
Yeah. But it's not.
It's not. It's not.
It's the conditioning, right? They don't know any better. I never understood why people said after university, like, you should go travel and figure yourself out and who you are. And the more I do this podcast, I realize how important it is for my kids to be able to experience that because what they want and what I want for them are probably two different things, even as themselves.
Good point too, for sure. I was going to say, and I think this might come up later, but this piece of what you want for them, I think the question comes up about what you want in a partner too, right? So is it your own expectation of what you want from your partner? Is it realistic? Are they able to provide that for you, or are you sitting around waiting and then resentment is building because they're not changing?
That's the bigger question. I think when I see people get married very young and I ask them the questions like, "Oh, did you guys talk about this? Did you talk about this?" And none of that has been discussed. And what seems fun where he's at the bar on Sundays watching football all day, that might be cute and funny when you guys are dating, but when you're married with two kids and he's neglecting that parental responsibility, all of a sudden it becomes problematic. But it's like he's been doing that for so many years, and that's where men sometimes go, "What did I do? Like, you want me to change something, but this hasn't been discussed prior to us getting married."
I know that's a question we have up here as well, right? Like what are some things that we want to maybe discuss early on? And I usually say like as much as you can, right? If you're in a serious relationship, you're talking, I'd say talk, basically. Talk about anything and everything, not in an overwhelming way, but just get to know each other in terms of your habits, where they're coming from, what you want that future to look like. There's so many things to talk about. so many things. And you're only going to know each other once you share.
It's interesting. I have some girlfriends of mine who we all have kids who are in their early 20s, and we're compiling a list of things that they should be asking potential partners. And it's funny. I should do a separate episode on its own because it's things like, how are women treated in your family? How do you resolve conflict? When you're stressed out, what are the things you do? What are your healthy habits? Like, I'm like, oh my God, this is gold.
Yeah. What does self-care look like? How do you react when you're upset? Yeah. Oh my goodness. So many things.
From your experience, Harj, what really determines whether a relationship will last?
I say a solid friendship. Think if you're good friends, just think about qualities you look for in a friend, right? Yeah, it's usually like one of the first people you kind of contact when something's fun or something good or something exciting or something scary. Like that's the person you share news with, your best friend, generally. So I would say a solid friendship is a huge piece. Safe communication, right, which we just alluded to. So can you talk to this person? Do they have your back? Do they provide enough empathy, validation, also challenge you a little bit safely in times? And I think when you think about meeting each other's emotional needs as well, that's a huge piece too. And then talking about the other stuff like big core values, future, finances, on the same page with most of those, you'll be good to go.
Thinking about, if you decide to have kids and who's going to raise those kids and in what environment, especially with this economy, does that look like? What do couples often think matters that actually doesn't?
Okay, personal opinion, but coming from lots of experience of working with couples. I think for those couples who are looking to have a long-term relationship and get married, have witnessed a lot of energy, time, and money going into planning their wedding, which is a very important part of our lives, milestones for all of us. However, what gets missed is those early stages of marriage. Everything we just talked about. Who are we living with? Are we living with your folks? Are we not? Are we getting our own place? Are we living in the basement? If we're living in the basement, are we cooking our own food? Are we expected to go upstairs? What do family gatherings look like? Am I expected? Are you expected? Are we going to each other's gathering? Like there's so much, and again, it's impossible to talk about everything before you get married, but I think there's definitely space there in those years before you get married or before you have that long-term commitment to start talking about these things and figuring out how is this going to work for the two of us.
That's really interesting. A friend of mine was telling me a story that there's a toxic aunt. Every family has a toxic aunt or uncle. And the toxic aunt, she's just known to be that toxic aunt. And when she got married, that toxic aunt was being toxic to the new daughter-in-law. And she didn't like that because she goes, I'm not used to having that. All my aunts are actually pretty nice and I have good relationships. But the way she was talking to me and berating me, I didn't feel comfortable. And so when I expressed that to my husband, he was just like, well, that's just the way she is. You just have to kind of accept it. And she's like, well, no, no, that's just not the way it is. I don't feel comfortable with her being around me because it makes me feel bad about myself. But even that was, for her, she said, such an eye-opening moment. She said to herself, I better think about how I'm going to proceed here because you ask your mom on, okay, what should I do here? And your mom's like, just let it go, let it go. But we as independent women with our own brains and our own incomes, we're toe to toe with men in society now, or trying to be, if the world lets us be, and then we're belittled and told to go put an apron on and go do those things. That might not align.
It's this whole mentality that, again, would have been passed down as to, don't rock the boat. You're in someone else's family now, keep the peace. And it's somehow your responsibility as a daughter-in-law to keep the peace. It's very interesting dynamics, right? But at the same time, I will say I see a really cool shift happening too, whether it's with, mom-in-laws and daughter-in-laws or son-in-laws, whatever role you have, there's some shifting happening, which is pretty nice to see as well.
When we talk about emotional safety in relationships, what does that actually look like?
Okay. Do you want to do a quick role play?
Sure.
Okay. So you're going to come home from work. I'm going to ask you how your day was, and then you're going to respond with kind of like it sucked. Pretty short. It was a really hard day. Okay.
Okay.
We're going to do it twice. I'm going to give you one response, and I'm going to give you a different response, and we'll talk about what emotional connection looks like. Hey, how was your day?
It sucked today.
Mine too. Guess what happened? So and so hit my car door. I'm so annoyed.
That sucks. I could, I'd be like, you made it about you. That's where I'm just like, I just told you something and you did not hear me and you made it
Yeah.
about you. Okay, this is where I
Yep.
leave the conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try this again.
Okay, how was your day?
Oh, it sucked today.
No, that's not good. What happened?
Oh, well, I had a really tough day at work today because I couldn't get this report in on time. I'm gonna have to work tonight, but thanks for asking.
Yeah, no worries.
How was your day?
I could go on and do some
Yeah.
more validating and some more empathy. You could say, "Oh, it sucks. It was hard. It was blah 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 blah." And all I need to do, not to minimize it, but a big thing actually that I need to do is validate your feelings. Just that one word. If I was to say take away something today, I would say try and prioritize validating your partner's feelings before you start talking about the behavior or something that was said. And this is important for yourself too, to know your own feelings. Validate your own feelings always.
And communication, half of it is actually listening. It's amazing when I have conversations with adults and they've already formulated their response to what I'm talking about without even taking in what I'm saying.
Yes, yes, yes. Most of us do that. So that when we do couples therapy, that's what we do. We slow down this conversation. We slow down every conversation to the point of one person sharing and the other person for a short period of time is not allowed to respond. Put like a timer on and say, okay, this person's going to share, and then when the timer goes off, what I want you to do is tell me what you heard them say. What feelings popped out and what did you hear them say? Because that's what we're doing is we're forcing you to listen and understand versus give you a response like you said, right? So we're slowing that piece down.
It's like when my kids were young and they were misbehaving, and I'd be like, "Okay, don't touch the stove." And then I would explain to them why not touch the stove. And then I'd be, "Okay, repeat it back to me," and be like, "I can't touch the stove because it's hot and I'll get an owie." I'm like, "Yeah,
That's so good. That's
right?"
exactly what it is. You're confirming that they understand what you've said. And they also get to verbalize it. So they're now it's creating a deeper understanding for them too.
That all comes back to your environment, right? Where if it was like, "Don't touch the stove," and then your hand gets smacked, then that's how you're gonna respond as an adult, I would guess.
Exactly, exactly, right? So I think, yeah, when we do that trajectory from like childhood to now our relationships, so keeping in mind also our 20s. There's some pretty big milestones that happen in our 20s, whether we're going away for education or we start to take trips without family members. And there's a lot more autonomy that goes on in our 20s. In our 20s as well, we can shift, right? So if there's cracks in the foundation from childhood, I think for some of us, what happens in our 20s and early 30s is we start to do a bit of repair. So even if you've had some cracks in your childhood and you've had some dysfunction in your childhood, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be no failure in relationships because I think so much happens from childhood to now relationships as well, that there's a lot of repair that can happen internally.
It's interesting, my kids still live at home, and I encourage them that once they're done school or and are working is to live by themselves for a bit. But the thing I say to them is, "You're not gonna wanna come back because as much as I think I am a great parent and, your dad's a great parent, I'm sure there's things that you're gonna be like, 'Oh my god, I don't like that about my mom,' and it's gonna be hard for you to wanna live with me knowing all those things." So that's really good to hear that couples are coming in and getting the tools to listen and hear. What are some signs a couple will struggle with conflict long term?
I would say if they're stuck in a cycle of probably unhealthy repair.
What does unhealthy repair look like?
Unhealthy repair could look like an argument happens and one person walks out mid-argument, right? Mid-argument, one person walks out, and then whatever hour, half hour later, the couple come back together, but you actually don't talk about any. It's swept under the rug, what we used to say. And you just carry on like that nothing happened. So it might seem like a repair. Like one person might come in thinking, yeah, you know what, I'm not going to worry about that anymore. It's done. Let's carry on with that day. So for that person, or for both people, it might seem like, oh, this is a repair. We're done with that now. Except when you think about all the feelings that were involved in that disagreement, things that were said, values that were challenged, all these things, those don't get discussed. So they're just kind of left hanging.
Oh, they'll appear again in your next argument.
Well, they most certainly generally do because it's a cycle, right? So it's like, okay, this is how we argue now. You're the one that walks out, or I'm the one that shuts down, or I'm the one that like, screams. Like what? Everyone gets used to these patterns, and they're quite hard to break.
Okay, so arguments happen, disagreements happen. How do healthy couple, how do they argue differently?
Before arguing, their general communication is pretty decent. They can talk to each other, they can listen to each other, they validate each other's feelings. They can sit down and have kind of, one of these deeper conversations. Not that they're happening every day, but they can kind of do this, right? They can have the emotional connection. So that sets you up for even if you now do have a disagreement, you've got a good foundation there. You've already got trust built. You already know that you take each other's word quite seriously. And the person already is thinking for the best of you. So even when you're having a disagreement, you're not coming at it as, oh, this is my enemy and I need things to now basically win the argument. I don't need, right? You don't have to come in that way.
And sometimes the tipping point, it's something else. They say the straw that broke the camel's back. It's the last straw, but it's all those underlying issues that haven't been addressed. But it's hard. Marriage is very difficult, especially if you have kids, you've got in-laws, you've got family obligations, you've got work, you've got all these other competing priorities. But, trying to figure out a healthy pathway that you and your partner maintain that communication and are a solid team, I think can help you navigate through these tough storms, which are inevitable in any relationship.
This is it, right? I think the stress that comes into our lives as a couple is inevitable. But if you've got a bit of a sturdy foundation there to have difficult conversations, you're then able to kind of get through the stress as well. If you're able to say, hey, we've got this kind of big elephant in the room, we need to talk about it, and it's difficult, you can actually name that, and that will even help. That will even help just bring kind of the intensity down, knowing both of us feel really stressed about this and we need to talk about it still.
The values part is so important. And so if you're a woman listening to today's podcast, I'm going to say something else, and this is my own personal opinion. Please be with a man who is secure, because if you are bringing everything to the table and you're not able to share your wins with your partner, that's not cool.
No, who else are you going to share them
Who
with?
are you going to share them with? And that insecurity of, oh, wow, my wife's doing all of this. And they may be upset at other things, but it's really deep down inside. They feel emasculated because, their wife is a superstar. Whereas you want a man who is like, oh, yeah, my wife is a superstar. I'm really proud of her. Why not? And either competition. That all goes back to that conversation of the relationship patterns that were modeled at home.
Exactly, right? So if there's a little bit of insecurity that doesn't get discussed, processed, or doesn't get challenged later, maybe like I said, later as we age, right? And we start to date, and sometimes it gets challenged in a healthy way. It's like, oh no, it's not actually how all relationships work, right? They can be different, they can be great in these ways, then otherwise they'd stay the same.
What is it that you can see, maybe as a woman listening to this, that somebody is capable of that growth along with you?
Capable of growth and change. Like what would that look like in terms of, like, if we say, if we're talking strictly about emotional intelligence, yes, then you can see nuggets of that. And you'll see pieces of that in your conversations with the person as well. Like when you're talking about emotions and having a difficult day, and let's say before they didn't used to ask, but now you said, hey man, like it's important for me if you ask how my day was. And now that has started happening, well, that's growth too.
That's growth. And I think with that also comes positive reinforcement, because I think by acknowledging that and saying, hey, I really appreciated you doing that for me, that then has that, okay, well, when this happens, this is what is good for that other person. When we talk about shared values and shared interests, how important is it to have shared values in a relationship or in a partner when you're looking for one?
I think it's pretty important. I think it's pretty important. I think when you think about interests, values, I think interests somewhat come from values, right? If your value is health and fitness, for example, your interests are probably going to be activity or interest in, certain foods that you like to eat. Values, I think, then, yeah, will show up in your interests. So I think it is important to have some alignment there. Obviously, it doesn't mean you're both going to be exactly the same, doing the exact same thing. But I think these are big important pieces to talk about when you're getting together, is what does family look like? What do finances look like? What does communication look like? What does health look like to you?
I'm going to add just kind of my personal anecdote and say that I know a lot of times in the media it's put like, okay, well, 50-50. I have a really unique opinion, because early on in our marriage, my husband and I decided he was a manager at that time. And he said, I learned this theory at work, and it says that you should not be good at everything. You should just focus the things you are good at. And in our relationship, I'm more the person, the matriarch, who's the inside, the cooking, cleaning, grocery, good at that stuff. I don't want to train anybody to do it because I like things done my own way. And he's the outside guy. Anything happens with my vehicle, grass cutting, all that, that's the exterior of the home. And he managed that, which is a very traditional way of thinking. But that's what works in our marriage. And that way there's never an issue with, oh, you didn't buy groceries this week because it's your week and we delegated that. Like, I don't want to do that. I'm okay with it. I'm really happy with just like, these are your tasks in this home and just do them really well. And I do them really, really well. And we're really happy. And that's what brings us peace. And that's our 50-50.
Well, that's it. Look at those words you said. I'm happy with it. It brings us peace. You've both talked about it, right? You've talked about it and agreed to it. So it works for both of you versus assuming the traditional roles. For one of you, let's say it wasn't great and you didn't want to cut the grass and you want your partner to cut the grass because you hate cutting the grass. It's like, oh, but you've talked about it. You've talked about it. You've agreed to it. Again, you use these big words. You're happy with it. That's your piece. So that's what works in your pod.
And that's totally fine.
Everyone's pod's going to look a little bit different. And again, it's not everything like this, right? We both cook together. We both clean together. You do the cooking, I do the cleaning, and it has to stay exactly like that. And then
I'm sure there's things my husband stresses about that I don't even consider, and vice versa. And I'm okay with that because sometimes the peace in the home to me is better. I'm just more efficient at doing certain things, and I'm okay with it. I love cooking. That's the other thing is that just making sure there's a lot of men who might listen and they enjoy cooking. So they're on top of that, which is fine. Whatever brings them both peace, but as long as they've discussed that value, I think is really important. If you're listening right now and you're thinking of getting married or you're deep into a relationship and you want to know if this is the right person based on all the people who come in and talk to you, what are the 10 things that you should absolutely discuss when it comes to marriage?
start off with what does it look like when you're angry and upset? So talk about emotions. What do your emotions look like? What do you do when you're really happy, really angry, really sad, really stressed? What do you do? What does that look like? Who do you go to? Who do you talk to? Because that's the EQ, that's emotional. I would start there for sure. And then I'd go to like other values, like what does family look like? What do friends look like? And when I say look like, I mean, do you spend time with them? Do you talk to them? Are there roles in your family? Are there gender roles? You talk about those things. Says, right? Are you a little bit of a saver, a little bit of a spender? Do you like to do a little bit of both?
That is a
Yeah.
real conversation to have. They say most marriages end because of finances.
Well, it's a popular one that comes up in therapy for sure. How is money spent? Who pays for what? How do we pay for things versus how do I pay for something? It's a hard one, I will say for sure.
So, Harj, if somebody's listening to today's episode and they are in a relationship or are thinking of getting married and they don't know if this person is the one, what are some things they need to consider and talk about prior to committing to marriage or a long-term relationship?
I would say one of the most important ones is communication. Like, what's emotional, safe communication look like? The little role play we just did earlier. What does that look like? And they might already know a little bit of that based on the relationship they've already had with this person. I would talk about finances because that's huge, expectations of each other, and then together. And then I would talk about living arrangements because, again, within our culture especially, that can look pretty specific, but pretty unique at the same time.
As we wrap up part 1 of this 2-part series with Harj, the goal of today's conversation was simple but powerful, which is awareness. Before we can build healthier relationships, choose better partners, or create lasting love, we have to understand our own patterns, why we're drawn to certain people, how childhood dynamics shape attraction. We also began laying the foundation for what actually sustains long-term love. Because healthy relationships aren't built on passion alone, they're built on self-awareness, maturity, shared values, and the willingness to grow. If this episode sparked reflection, that's the point. The work starts with recognizing your habits. In part 2, we'll even go deeper into how to apply this awareness in real time, especially when relationships feel stuck, strained, or uncertain. Because the better you understand your patterns, the more intentionally you can choose your future. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you subscribe and continue the conversation on Instagram or TikTok at Her Energy Unlocked Podcast. I cannot wait to hear from you. Until next time, remember your energy is yours to reclaim and your next chapter is waiting. And I will see you in part 2 of this episode.